The Wave, Chapter 12. The Wave rally would be in the gym, but Lori Saunders stood by her locker, uncertain that she wanted to go. She still couldn't put into words exactly what bothered her about the Wave, but she could feel it growing inside her. Something was wrong. The anonymous letter that morning was a symptom. It wasn't only that a senior had tried to bully a junior into joining the Wave, it was more the fact that the junior hadn't put his name on the letter. The fact that he'd been afraid to. It was something Lori herself had been trying to deny for days, but it just wouldn't go away. The Wave was scary. Oh, it was just great if you were an unquestioning member. But if you weren't... Lori's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden flurry of shouts out in the quadrangle. She quickly went to a window and saw that two boys were fighting while a crowd of kids stood watching and yelling at them. Lori gasped. One of the fighters was Brian Amon. She watched as they threw punches at each other and then awkwardly wrestled to the ground. What in the world? Now a teacher ran out and separated the two fighters. Grabbing each tightly by the arm, he started tugging them inside, no doubt to Principal Owen's office. As he went, Brian shouted, "Strength through discipline, strength through community, strength through action." The other boy shouted back, "Ah, shove it." "You see that?" The sudden sound of a voice so close to her startled Lori, and she jumped around to find David beside her. "I hope Principal Owens lets Brian attend the Wave rally after this," David said. "Were they fighting about the Wave?" Lori asked. David shrugged. "It's more than that. That kid Brian was fighting, he's this junior named Dutch, who's been after Brian's position all year. This thing's been brewing for weeks. I just hope he got what he deserved." "But Brian was shouting the Wave motto," Lori said. "Well, sure, he's really into it. We all are." "Even the kid he was fighting?" David shook his head. "Nah, Dutch is a jerk, Lori. If he was in the Wave, he wouldn't be trying to steal Brian's position. That guy's a real detriment to the team. I wish Schiller would just throw him off." "Because he isn't in the Wave?" Lori asked. "Yeah," David replied. "If he really wanted the best for the team, he'd join the Wave instead of giving Brian such a hard time. He's a one-man team, Lori. He's just on a big ego trip, and he's not helping anyone." David looked down the hall at the clock. "Come on, we've got to get to that rally. It's going to start in a second." Suddenly, Lori made a decision. "I'm not going," she said. "What?" David looked shocked. "Why not?" "Because I don't want to." "Lori, this is an incredibly important rally," David said. "All the new members of the Wave are going to be there." "David, I think you and everyone else are taking this whole Wave thing a little bit too seriously." David shook his head. "No, I'm not. You're not taking this seriously enough. Look, Lori, you've always been a leader. The other kids, they've always looked up to you. You've got to be at that rally." "But that's exactly why I'm not going," Lori tried to explain. "Let them make up their own minds about the Wave. They're individuals. They don't need me to help them." "I don't understand you," David said. "David, I can't believe how crazy everybody's gotten. The Wave is taking over everything." "Sure," David said. "Because the Wave makes sense, Lori. It works. Everybody's on the same team. Everybody's equal for once." "Oh, that's terrific," Lori said sarcastically. "Do we all score a touchdown?" David stepped back and studied his girlfriend. He hadn't expected anything like this, not from Lori. "Don't you see," Lori said, mistaking his hesitation for a glimmer of doubt. "You're so idealistic, David. You're so intent on creating some kind of utopian Wave society full of equal people and great football teams that you don't see it at all. It can't happen, David. There will always be a few people who won't want to join. They have a right not to join." David squinted at his girlfriend. "You know," he said, "you're just against this thing because you're not special anymore, because you're not the best and most popular student in the class now." "That's not true, and you know it," Lori gasped. "I think it is true," David insisted. "Now you know how all the rest of us felt listening to you always giving the right answers, always being the best. How does it feel not to be the best anymore?" "David, you're being stupid," Lori yelled at him. David nodded. "All right. If I'm so stupid, why don't you go find yourself a smart boyfriend?" He turned and walked away toward the gym. Lori stood behind and watched him. It's crazy, she thought. Everything is going out of control. From what Lori could hear, the Wave rally was a giant success. She was spending the period in the publications office down the hall. It was the only place she could think of going where she would be safe from the questioning looks of kids wondering why she wasn't at the rally. Lori did not want to admit that she was hiding, but it was true. That was how crazy this whole thing had become. You had to hide if you weren't part of it. Lori took out a pen and chewed on it nervously. She had to do something. The Grapevine had to do something. A few minutes later, the turning of the doorknob shook her from her thoughts. Lori caught her breath. Had someone come to get her? The door opened and Alex bopped to the beat of the music coming through his earphones. Lori sank back in her chair and let out a big sigh. When Alex saw Lori, he smiled and pulled the earphones off his head. Hey, how come you're not with the troops? Lori shook her head. Alex, it's not that bad. But Alex just grinned. Oh yeah? Pretty soon they're going to have to change the name of the school to Fort Gordon High. I'm not amused, Alex, Lori said. Alex scrunched up his shoulders and made a face. Lori, you must learn that nothing is above ridicule. Well, if you think they're troopers, aren't you frightened of being drafted too? Lori asked. Alex grinned. Who, me? Then he swiped through the air with several fierce-looking karate chops. Anyone hassles me and I'll kung fu them to chop suey. The door of the publications office opened again, and now Carl slipped in. Seeing Lori and Alex there, he smiled. Looks like I've stumbled into Anne Frank's attic, he said. The last of the rugged individuals, Alex said. Carl nodded. I believe it. I just came from the rally. They let you out? Alex asked. I had to go to the bathroom, Carl answered. Hey man, Alex said. You got the wrong place. Carl grinned. This is where I went after the bathroom. Any place but that rally. Join the club, Lori said. Maybe we should give ourselves a name, Alex said. If they're the wave, we could be the Ripple. What do you think? Carl asked. About calling ourselves the Ripple? Lori asked. No, about the wave. I think it's time we put out that issue of the Grapevine, Lori said. Excuse me for injecting my own not always serious opinion, Alex said, but I think we ought to put it out fast before the rest of the staff gets carried away by the mighty wave. Pass the word around to the other staff members, Lori said. On Sunday at 2 o'clock, we'll have an emergency meeting at my house and try to make sure only non-wave members are there. That night, Lori stayed alone in her room. Afternoon, she'd been too preoccupied with the wave to allow herself to feel anything about David. Besides, they'd had fights before. But earlier in the week, David had made a date to take her out that night, and here it was, 10:30. It was obvious he wasn't coming, but Lori couldn't quite believe it. They'd been going together since sophomore year, and suddenly, something as trivial as the wave had broke them up. Only, the wave wasn't trivial. Not anymore. Several times during the evening, Mrs. Saunders had come up to her room to ask if she wanted to talk about it, but Lori said she didn't. Her mother was such a worrywart, and the problem was that this time there really was something worth worrying about. Lori had been sitting at her desk trying to write something about the wave for the Grapevine, but so far, the page of paper before her was empty, except for a few watermarks where a tear or two had fallen. There were knocks on her door, and Lori quickly wiped her eyes with the palm of her hands. It was no use. If her mother came in, she'd see that she was crying. I don't want to talk, Mom, she said. But the door had started to open anyway. It's not your mom, babe. Dad? Lori was surprised to see her father. It wasn't that she didn't feel close to him, but unlike her mother, he usually didn't get involved in her problems, unless they somehow concerned golf. Can I come in? Her father asked. Well, Dad, Lori smiled slightly, considering the fact that you're already in. Mr. Saunders nodded. I'm sorry to barge in, babe, but your mother and I are both worried. She told you David broke up with me? Lori asked. Yeah, she did, Mr. Saunders said. And I'm sorry about that, babe. I really am. I thought he was a nice boy. He was, Lori said, until the wave, she thought. But I'm concerned about something else, Lori, about something I heard on the golf course this evening. Mr. Saunders always left work early on Fridays to play 9 holes of golf in the Twilight League before the sun went down. What, Dad? Now, today after school, a boy was beaten up, her father said. Now, I got this story secondhand, so I don't know if it's all accurate, but apparently there was some kind of rally at school today, and he had resisted joining this wave game, or said something critical about it. Lori was speechless. The boy's parents are neighbors of one of the men I play golf with. They just moved in this year, so the boy must have been new at school. Sounds like he would have been a perfect candidate for joining the wave, Lori said. Maybe, said Mr. Saunders, but Lori, the boy is Jewish. Could that have had anything to do with it? Lori's jaw dropped. You don't think... Dad, you can't believe there's anything like that going on. I mean, I don't like the wave, but it's not like that, Dad. I swear it isn't. Are you sure? Mr. Saunders asked. Well, I know everyone who was originally in the wave. I was there when it began. The whole idea was to show how something like Nazi Germany could have happened. It wasn't for us to become little Nazis. It sounds like it's gotten out of hand, Lori, her father said. Has it? Lori just nodded. She was too shocked to be able to say anything. Some of the men were talking about going to school on Monday to talk to the principal, Mr. Saunders said, just so you know, to be on the safe side. Lori nodded. We're going to put out a special issue of the Grapevine. We're going to expose this whole thing. Her father was quiet for a few moments. Sounds like a good idea, babe. But be careful, okay? I will, Dad, Lori said. I promise.